to really empower people to go home feeling that much better about getting around in their own town, or hopefully even doing their own vacation next time.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 58 of the Strokecast. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we have some of the most amazing scenery and outdoor options in the country. So why do all your rehab in a clinic? Today's guest is physical therapist Dr. Carol Ann Nelson, the founder and executive director of Destination Rehab in Bend, Oregon. For those not familiar with the geography here, Bend is in the middle of the state of Oregon, about a 6-hour drive southeast of Seattle. It's surrounded by mountains, volcanoes, forests, a river, and incredible wildlife. It's an absolutely gorgeous city and region, and, I'd encourage anyone to go ahead and visit. It's just amazing. Destination Rehab combines PT with outdoor activities, taking advantage of all that Central Oregon has to offer. They have year-round programs for folks in the area, and they also offer week-long rehab vacations for folks with neuro conditions who want to travel to the area. Participants include stroke survivors, plus folks with MS, Parkinson's, TBI, spinal cord injury, and other conditions. Carol Ann's love for the outdoors began during her years growing up in Oregon. In 2016, she founded Destination Rehab, a nonprofit organization that takes physical therapy principles out of the clinic walls and into the outdoors. Their focus is to build confidence, independence, and improve the quality of life for individuals with physical disabilities and chronic conditions. Carol Ann received her Doctor of Physical Therapy from Duke University and practiced in the Neuro Recovery Center at Brooks Rehabilitation before returning to her home state of Oregon in 2015. Carol Ann serves as Vice President of the Oregon Physical Therapy Association and is a member of the American Physical Therapy Association's Neurologic Section. Carol Ann and her husband have 4-year-old twins, a 6-month-old baby girl, and an energetic border collie. Carol Ann is passionate about helping others dream big, gain the confidence they need to enjoy being active and outdoors. So now, let's meet Carol Ann.
Carol Ann, thank you so much for joining us here on Strokecast this week. I'm glad we could finally connect.
Yes, I know. It took a bit of work, but we made it.
and it's still not quite springtime yet, or it will be springtime by the time this goes live. But I mean, it's a really perfect time to be talking about the program that you're a part of. And I was really excited to hear about it when you reached out to my support group. So, what is Destination Rehab?
So Destination Rehab is a nonprofit that I founded about 3 years ago. And the whole goal is to use physical therapy and physical therapy principles to help people get out of their homes, get back into what I'm calling the real world, meaning community life, outdoor life, enjoying nature, doing sport activities, and being healthy and improving their quality of life.
And, it's really interesting that you use the term real world there, because I know a lot of folks who know about Bend, Oregon tend to think of it as the farthest they can get from the real world. I know it is a fantastic community. I've been there for concerts, and, besides a fantastic selection of microbrews and even larger breweries down there. Seriously, if you're into quality beer and your doctor's okay with it, Bend is a great place to be. But why Bend, Oregon?
Well, to be honest, I grew up in Oregon, moved to the East Coast for graduate school, and worked in a large rehab hospital for a few years. And then my husband and I had twins, a boy and a girl, and we decided we needed a little more family support and help. And we had always wanted to move to Central Oregon. So we moved here to be closer to family.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it is just gorgeous out there if you're looking to get out in the outdoors, Bend is a fantastic place.
Yes, I can see about 6 or 7 mountains from many places in Bend. We have a beautiful river that goes through the middle of town with walking paths alongside. We have lots of fun paths that go through town and connect to each other and go to different parks, as well as hiking trails that you can get to within 10 to 20 minutes of town if you're up for a very short drive.
That is awesome. And I think one of the challenges that many stroke survivors do have is that as they go through recovery and start transitioning to that post-stroke life, many folks, stop seeing some of the outdoor possibilities because of the challenges of just getting out of their homes and getting out and seeing other places. Opportunities to get someplace like that, are just.
Yeah, I've really found that isolation is a huge issue for a lot of the folks seeking out my program. And a lot of the folks that I'm working with here locally, they just have gotten to this point where they feel like they're trapped at home. They feel isolated. They're not sure what they can get out and do or what would be possible for them. And so they're looking for that extra support and just ready to launch into something new.
So how did you go about starting the organization?
Well, I was working in a large rehab hospital with a lot of support and a lot of technology. And our patients worked really hard, and all of the therapists worked really hard and saw a lot of progress in our patients. But then they would come to me in a therapy session and they would say, oh, the only time I leave my house is to come to therapy or go to a doctor's appointment. And I thought, gosh, we are missing something. Physical therapists should be out with you in the community, on the trails, helping train in that environment, because there was a gap that on their own, our patients weren't feeling like they were able to traverse that gap. And so I recognized this is something that physical therapists can solve. So when I moved out to Oregon, I decided, why not try and start being part of that solution?
I think part of it is, as survivors, we may be uncertain about our own capabilities, and our caregivers may be even more nervous about our capabilities outside. And once they get out in a more challenging environment than just in the home where everything is known, that puts so much extra stress on the caregivers too, that, not having that professional PT training makes it harder for them to be comfortable going out with us on hiking trails and exploring the outdoors.
Absolutely. And there are so many things to consider when you're trying a new activity or getting back to an activity that you used to do prior to your stroke. You have to think about parking. You have to think about how to use the restroom. Is there going to be a restroom? What kind of terrain? Fear about getting stuck out on the trail or getting stuck out on the water without the right support to get back to land. So I think one of the neat things that I've seen that my program can offer is that sort of peace of mind that a lot of those things are going to be planned for and taken care of. And that when unexpected things come up, there's a team there alongside to say, hey, let's solve this together. And here's some equipment that we brought. Here are some solutions. Let's see what's possible. And I think it takes away a lot of that fear and allows people to jump in and try something new that they wouldn't do on their own, and that maybe their caregiver wouldn't feel confident or doesn't have the bandwidth to do. A lot of folks who are dealing with a stroke, a lot of their time is already taken up dealing with the day-to-day life of having this medical complication. And so to think about adding something to their life, adding a hike on a regular basis, or adding some biking, or adding some outdoor trips, just can seem overwhelming.
So what is an adventure rehab vacation? What does that look like?
So what we do is we gather a group together who wants to do this vacation. I bring in some physical therapists who are trained working with neurologic conditions. And we rent a house here in Bend and bring everybody in and provide the local transportation that we need. And then we plan out full days of activities. So the goal is for folks to come here, have a wonderful vacation in a beautiful mountain town and experience the culture that we have here, but also that they would experience a sort of intensive rehab week. So we're writing goals on day one on what we want to accomplish for each individual person. And then we're tailoring activities to the group and to the individuals, trying to kind of push people beyond their limits and push people into a new sense of accomplishment, a new sense of confidence. So some of the activities that we have are, we might start the day with a yoga or Pilates session to get stretched out, to get moving, to get warmed up. We might cook breakfast together. We may go on a walk around the neighborhood or downtown. And then we can do a number of different activities throughout the day. And it depends on the people who come and their ability levels and their own personal goals. So everything from hiking to a kayak down the river to a fishing trip, rock climbing, the sky's the limit, I would say.
I think one of the things that's really interesting there too is it's not just that you're talking about some time for adaptive activities to accommodate disabilities that somebody may be dealing with, and sort of adaptive environment for being comfortable, but it's actually a therapeutic experience, not just as a secondary benefit, but there is actually a therapeutic goal attached to this.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's what makes us slightly different than just a recreational therapy experience or an adaptive sport experience. I really want to bring people in who want to work hard and they want to improve their skills and improve their knowledge and education and their strategies for being more independent out in the community, whether that means going to the park or a museum or the movies or your favorite restaurant or climbing a mountain, whatever that might be, to really narrow in on some of the key skills that they might be missing that will launch them into a new ability to be independent, to have greater confidence. And my goal is that we really push people in this rehab vacation to where you go home and you're doing your everyday life and it feels easier because you look back at the rehab vacation camp and you say, well, gosh, I accomplished this during the camp. Now going home, I can do everyday life stuff and it feels so much easier.
Yeah, definitely. That sense of accomplishment is something that can be tough to come by many times. And I think also the idea of having a beginning and an end to the camp also provides you with a nice sort of benchmark of where you can see where you started and where you ended up.
When someone first is interested in the camp and then they become serious about signing up, we start gathering information from them so that we know a lot about each person before they come in. We know their individual goals and desires, where they're starting at in terms of ability level. Hopefully we've gotten some of their physical therapy and other therapeutic notes so that we get a sense of some of the things they've already been working on in therapy. And then we have a really good idea of what we want to target during the camp. But once we finally have the person here on site, then we run them through some physical tests and create specific goals for the week based off of that. For example, someone might come in and we notice that their agility and balance is lacking, or their coordination and some of their motor control around navigating different obstacles, maybe while distracted, while talking, or multitasking. Another example would be wheelchair skills. If someone is uncomfortable traversing broken sidewalks, which is very common down here in our downtown, that might be a specific goal for the week, is as we're going around, we're working on wheelchair skills, and it's really targeted and specific and very intentional. So we're doing fun activities and we're doing recreation, and it's an awesome vacation experience. But at the same time, you're getting that deeper level of working on really targeted goals, and you have therapists watching you all week long and correcting things and giving education and saying, hey, try it this way. Hey, try it that way. So that to really empower people to go home feeling that much better about getting around in their own town, or hopefully even doing their own vacation next time.
That really puts together a really good package that makes a big difference. So I think talking about wheelchair skills in an outdoor experience is really interesting. I mean, how capable does a survivor really need to be to participate in the program?
That's a good question. Right now, we are in the beginning stages of the program. The organization is only 3 years old, so we're still working on finding the right resources to support appropriately. So I would say where we're at right now, we are pretty well set up to bring in manual wheelchair users, as well as anyone who is ambulating with an assistive device or ambulating without an assistive device. My goal would be to bring in everyone down the road, but I want to make sure we have the right equipment, and some equipment can be a lot more expensive. So I think as we build, we'll have better capacity to bring in power wheelchair users and be able to appropriately support them. Does that answer your question?
That does. So how about in terms of cognitive or communication skills? At what level does a survivor need to be in those areas, in some of those invisible disability areas?
Great question. We do offer for caregivers to come at a significantly reduced cost. Basically, if we're feeding them or if they need a private room, then that would be part of the cost. But other than that, we invite a friend or a caregiver to come. We also have some folks here that you can hire if you need help with, say, bathing or dressing, some of those kinds of things. And cognitively, some of that would be determined when we're talking with the person before the camp. So if someone wants to come alone, I would definitely want to communicate with them beforehand and make sure that we can address their needs because we don't know them as closely. And once you arrive, we kind of hit the ground running. So that would be the main thing, is I would just want to make sure that person could be really well supported. So probably if cognition is a really significant concern, I would ask for them to bring a caregiver with them just to make sure that when they get here, we can maximize the time.
I think one of the things that's also really interesting too, in that distinction you drew before, in how it's different from, say, a recreational therapy experience or an adaptive sporting experience, is that the lodging and meal costs for supporting a caregiver is essentially a very low portion of the expense of participating in a program. It's really a lot of the cost around a program is around the therapeutic benefit, which is why bringing a caregiver is so much less expensive.
And bringing a caregiver helps create a support system that can last longer than the camp, which also is really important. Ideally, down the road, I would love to see a community member come as well. And we could train someone in that person's local community while we're training the person themselves, so that they can take some of those skills back and know that they have a support team ready in their own community.
Or have you already been partnering with other organizations? I'm thinking of organizations like a Rehab Without Walls or similar that actually provide in-home therapy to help sort of share some of the learnings back and forth.
We do. We partner with a few different. We partner with the local hospital here. A lot of the therapists that work at the hospital, physical, occupational, and speech therapists, volunteer with my organization, so they're getting to know my participants throughout the year, or for my local activities. And then we partner with the local adaptive sports group here because they have a lot of equipment and training on that specific equipment that I don't necessarily have. So it's a really good partnership with them. We also are partnering with the physical therapy, doctor of physical therapy programs out of Portland. They actually send quite a few students to come observe and participate in some of our yearly activities. So we have a growing local program as well as the Adventure Vacation offering. The Adventure Vacation is for people who don't live in our immediate area, but I also offer one-on-one physical therapy services and small group activities for people who live locally.
Gotcha. So there's lots of opportunities for folks who are in the Central Oregon area, or even as far away from Portland, who want to participate on a somewhat regular basis, and more distance is where the Adventure Rehab program or Adventure Rehab Vacation program really comes into play.
Absolutely. Yep. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I would say I moved out here from a pretty big city and a very large rehab hospital. So it was a little bit of a culture shock to come here to Central Oregon and see, I would say, the lack of significant funding for really great top of the line therapy equipment like exoskeletons, like a lot of the functional electrical stim. I was used to being around a lot of that, and there isn't a lot of that out here. So in some ways, my program is built in an area and to be in an area where we might not have that large rehab facility, but through my program, I'm saying, hey, let's go out and let's make the outdoors our new clinic. Let's let the outdoors challenge us in a new way, a dynamic way, an unpredictable way. And there are things we can still work on that relate to progress functionally, physically, the same kind of goals that you might have for your clinic-based physical therapy sessions. We can do a lot of that out enjoying the great outdoors.
That is fantastic. And I think what's really key is, I mean, we see a lot of the shiny pictures of all the fancy equipment at some of the big rehab centers, but ultimately most of the rehab and what's most effective, it still comes down to the basics, of movement, of balance, of doing all these things that you don't necessarily need all of the super fancy gear for, all the high tech stuff for. It's nice to supplement, but there's a much more important base of that general experience, that general exercise, that general sense of going out and experiencing things.
Right. And it's not practical to expect everyone who has a stroke to move to one of the 5 or 6 great stroke centers in the country. So it's a lot more practical to say, okay, for everyday life and for where you're at or for where you're interested in vacationing to, here are some things that can help you be successful.
That's great. And then those are also then tools that you can go ahead and find in your own community. You can go ahead, you may not be able to find a functional e-stim or something like that in your own community, but you can probably find a park with some trails.
Yeah, I would hope so.
So, I mean, what are some of your favorite stories of folks who have come in and seen gains over the course of the week?
We had a gentleman come who had been really, really active most of his life, running 100 miles at a time in competition. So his goal was to get back to a little bit of trail running slowly, but he wanted to get out on the trails. And he also wanted to try a few activities that he was fearful of trying because of some of his balance concerns, and he just wasn't sure how his body would respond to a few things like kayaking and biking. So he came in and like I said, we did the testing at the beginning of the week, identified a few areas to work on, and then we took him all over the place to all different sorts of trails and not only taught him some strategies for navigating different trail terrain, but also taught him how to conserve his energy while he was doing this. So one of the things that we noticed that he did was he would just get really excited and he would go full steam at the beginning of a run or walk. And then a few minutes in, he was totally gassed out. And we pointed that out to him. He didn't realize it, didn't really understand why he was so tired, and just thought that it was a limitation of his stroke that he had had. And we pointed out to him that there are a lot of strategies to help him go further if he just starts doing some interval type activities. So we'd have him go for a little while, rest, and working with him that way, we figured out a good timeline for him to then improve his distance and improve his speed, but in a really strategic and a slower way.
Interesting. And that actually reminds me of, on a much smaller scale. I mean, even just the basics of PT in those first couple of weeks that, I was in my inpatient rehab is that, you spend so much energy on taking those first 3 or 4 steps and then you're just fried, but really you just need to take a break for a few moments and then you can do it again and again. And it seems like a lot of it is adapting some of those experiences we're used to a sort of a pre-stroke experience.
Yeah. We had another gentleman who would often ride his scooter everywhere because he got really fatigued and had a lot of difficulty walking. And we were able to show him how to use a recumbent bike. So this is a bike with 3 wheels. It's very sporty, so it doesn't look like a medical device at all. It's very fun and sporty. And we taught him how to get on, how to get off, how to adjust it for himself. It's something that you can purchase on your own. And he, by the end of the time, he was biking miles around these different parks and trails. And he actually ended up, now he has purchased his own bike and does several miles a day in his neighborhood. And he's known in his neighborhood now for being the guy who's riding fast on his bike all around the neighborhood. And so he went from really being fearful of doing anything except his scooter and a little bit of walking, very short distances. And now he just has experienced so much freedom with having the bike available, and he's strengthening his legs while he's doing it. So his walking has actually improved as a result of that.
That is excellent. I read a study about a year ago too about, they did a comparison between folks who went through traditional PT and folks who went through traditional PT plus 30 minutes of stationary bike work every day for 5 days a week for a month. And just having that extra experience of cycling, even on a stationary bike, improved balance, gait, sit to stand, all of those different metrics. It was really quite interesting.
Yeah. They're finding that now with many different populations. They're starting to do bike studies with other populations too, and finding the same great results. And then imagine if you could be on a bike and going alongside the river or looking at a mountain. It's so much better.
Absolutely. I can only stare at the back of my couch for so long.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you typically see, just by going out and doing this and having all these different experiences, are you seeing people with aphasia have improvements over the course of the week through the extra stimulation in the environment, or are you just not seeing that as much?
We are. There is a young gentleman who's been participating with us. He's actually participating in our local programs. And through the practice that he's gotten in different scenarios, different levels of background noise in the community, talking with different people, talking in a group versus talking one-on-one, he has improved significantly from being able to speak only maybe 3 words, and he can now put together small sentences and really get some of his thoughts across. So I think that in that sense, by being exposed to a lot of different types of challenges in different settings, not only being within the walls of a clinic or within the walls of your own home, it really stretches the brain and it really stretches the person and builds a lot more, I would say, dynamic neuroplasticity, where you're being challenged to try to work on that skill set again and again and again. Repetition is so important, but in really meaningful situations, and that can have a really strong impact on recovery.
It's one of those things I found with my own experience with OT as well, was that sometimes there was just tremendous value in changing therapists just because the body or the brain really craved some of that variety. And when you stop making progress, it's not because there's anything wrong with what any of those therapists are doing, but sometimes just having that different approach to even the same techniques makes a difference. It can spur some improvement. And moving into an environment that you're able to offer at Destination Rehab would certainly provide some of that variety and some of that diversity of experience.
Oh, absolutely. There's a huge amount of variety. So it's really fun for me as well, because I get to go out into the community with people and I don't always know what's going to happen, which is far more realistic to daily life. So we might not know whether or not, for example, we have a lot of snow right now. And so I've been working with a few different folks on, say, wheelchair skills in the snow. What do you do when your curb cut is totally covered in snow or it's super slushy and wet and slippery? You have to be able to get around a different way and problem solve. What happens when your favorite coffee shop, everyone has scooted all the chairs back and you can no longer navigate in the there's no longer ADA space for you. And so how do you figure out how to navigate around in those tight spots, or have someone move things, or whatever the solution might be? But it's amazing what getting out in the community and being exposed to different environments, outdoors and indoors. It's amazing the challenges that come up that I never would have thought of on my own, and I couldn't plan. And so I love having this really dynamic clinic environment where I can't always predict what's going to happen. And so I have to adjust alongside the person that I'm helping, and we problem solve together. And I think it builds a lot more confidence for my participants, because they see that it was a surprise to me as well, but we still were able to accomplish what we needed to. And we both learned in the process. It's an awesome way to be able to challenge people without everything being planned down to the minute or set up ahead of time. You know, we go out and we just experience the world and the outdoors, and we go for it, and we solve things as they come up.
Awesome. And it's so much more, can be so much more practical than setting up an obstacle course in the PT gym at the outpatient facility.
Yeah. And there's certainly a place for that. Mm-hmm. There are times where I will take patients indoors into a clinic environment because there's a certain piece of equipment that I can't drag outdoors. So there's absolutely a place for that traditional clinical model. But I think there's also room to fill in a gap that currently exists to help further recovery even more.
So with the Adventure Rehab Vacations too, you're bringing together a number of different survivors with a number of different neuro conditions. It's not just stroke. What do you see in terms of the post-rehab vacation relationships?
It's amazing to see how spending time together, eating meals together, talking over challenges, sharing fears, but supporting each other can really build an amazing, cohesive group. And what I've seen is people really forming tight communities and tight bonds with each other, and staying connected and continuing to share the new adventures that they're embarking on or the new challenges they're facing, and really offering support to each other. We also see that in our local programs. We have a group program that runs throughout the summer, and the people who participate in that group program are dedicated to it. So they stick with it the whole summer, and they have really formed some awesome relationships and awesome friendships. And one of the neat things about having mixed diagnoses in all of these group activities is that people really learn a lot and catch a new awareness for and a new vision for what other people are dealing with, but it's without some of the comparison that can happen when everyone in the room has the same condition that you have. So we sort of break that comparison tendency, and it allows for a really supportive and positive environment, which I really like. I think it's a lot more encouraging for folks to feel like they can share and not worry about the comparison, and they can share and encourage each other and uplift each other.
That's a really interesting point. You know, I think when I meet other stroke survivors, there's obviously an instant camaraderie there, but at the same time, you're looking at where you are. I find myself looking at where I am in my recovery versus where they are versus where our various deficits are, as you try and figure out how all this matches together. You pair that with, imposter syndrome, where you're looking at, is my condition really severe enough to be a part of this group or not severe enough? But, it's a separate kind of discussion from when I encounter folks who are dealing with recovery from TBI or living with CP or MS or some of these other neuro-related conditions. That I think that's really interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I've gotten that same feedback from a lot of folks participating in my program, that they didn't realize ahead of time how neat it would be to be in a mixed group, how much they would learn from the others in the group, but then also how much they could feel supported by other people who have some similar challenges, but also some very different things that they're looking at. And so it just creates a really unique and really cool and positive group dynamic.
Fantastic. So Carol Ann, if folks want to know more about the program and what you're up to, where should they go?
Best place to start is our website or Facebook or Instagram. It's also pretty easy to get a hold of me. My all the email information and phone information is up on our website. There's a dedicated page just for our Adventure Rehab Vacation, so you can find out more information about it and more details. We're offering one this summer in July that is a fixed date vacation, but I also am opening it up to folks who want to create their own private groups and create a customized vacation. And we would work with them to create the dates that work best for their schedule.
Fantastic. And folks can find all of those links and more over at strokecast.com/destination rehab. So Carol Ann, thank you so much for joining us this week. This has been awesome.
Yeah, good. Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
And that brings us to our hack of the week.
Well, I will be totally honest and say that I asked a few of my participants for their suggestions because they're really smart and have come up with great tips. So I will share one from them. Someone mentioned installing a touch control adapter in your lamps so that it's easy to turn on with just a touch of your skin. If you go on Amazon or some of the hardware stores, you can find it. It plugs into the wall and the lamp plugs into it. And then it either turns the entire lamp into a touch lamp or it has a little like button sort of a thing that comes out from it, and that can be your touch.
You know, I just love the energy and enthusiasm that Carol Ann brings to everything she does. If you'd like to learn more about taking a rehab vacation, visit strokecast.com/destination rehab or check out the show notes to learn more and find more links. Help someone you know subscribe to Strokecast on their own phone so they never miss an episode. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.